Hey guys, how you doing today? Today we're going to go over some more interesting stuff from the Rise of Skywalker novelization. If you haven't gotten the book, it comes out in just about a week or so now, I think on the 17th of March, and it covers a plethora, it's a big word, plethora of different stuff, and goes into far more detail than the movie ever did. It explains things that will make a lot more sense when you read them, so if you haven't checked it out, check it out, or just, continue watching these videos. Today we're going to go over an interesting topic. It's covering what Palpatine's original plan was with Anakin, and it's on page 222 and 223. Basically, before we start this video, in it's tough to separate these, George Lucas era and the new era. But that's kind of how I see things because I grew up with, everything that was sort of quote unquote canon then. And Legends then, which now is very Legends. Palpatine's original plan with Anakin then was for him to assume full power, and he saw the energy within this boy, the chosen one. He was created by the Force, and he figured if he could manipulate him, if he could turn him to the dark side, then he would have a very worthy apprentice. He would have the most powerful apprentice that he would need. Later, of course, then we expanded on the idea of cloning bodies and him jumping, into vessels and this and that, which is where we are today. However, in the original concept, we understood that even Plagueis himself had seen Anakin and withheld this information from Palpatine in the Plagueis novel, where he saw Anakin as a little boy in Tatooine, literally visually saw him, and had these nightmarish visions of him. One of them was of him rising on the metal table as Darth Vader, and another was of him wreaking havoc across the galaxy and just being this tyrant, and it scared him a lot. That's something that he didn't tell Palpatine. So let's read the passage, and then we're going to talk more about it, all right? So starting at page 222, around halfway down, and this takes place in the novel and in the movie where Palpatine literally just absorbs the Force dyad from Rey and Ben, and he's shocked. So this is where it is. The Emperor snarled. "Stand together, die together," he said. Then he raised his rotting hand and impaled them with the Force. Their backs arched against their wills, and the pain was breathtaking. Their lightsabers dropped from their hands and clattered to the ground. The Emperor yanked them towards himself, and they slid across the floor, helpless against his power, as he took and took and took. The Emperor gasped, stared at his hands, which had begun knitting themselves back together, bones regrowing, pale flesh closing over them. "The life force of your bond," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. "A dyad in the Force." His gleeful, triumphant thoughts washed over Rey, as she struggled against his grip, unable to move. He had won, at last. All those years, all that searching, he tried to create a dyad with Anakin, as his master had tried to create one with him. The rule of two, a master always in desperate search of yet a more powerful apprentice, was a pale imitation, an unworthy but necessary successor to the older, purer doctrine of the dyad. So if I'm reading this right, that means the dyad predates even the rule of two. If that was the number one, and if you couldn't get that, then the rule of two, it was implemented where you kill your master, an unworthy but necessary successor to the older, and just keep it going on. "Unseen for generations," he crowed. "And now the power of two restores the one true Emperor." He raised his perfect healed hands and called on all the dark power of the Force and the Sith who had come before him, and pulled their life from their very bodies. It poured from them like a river of light, leaving them weaker and weaker. The Emperor laughed as his body strengthened, became whole. The milky film faded from his eyes, revealing golden irises around obsidian pupils. And then it jumps to, "This is it," Snap Wexley called from inside, so it shifts the scene. So what's really interesting about this is that he wanted to, now we find out, that he wanted to basically instill or create this dyad in the Force with Anakin. And my knowledge here is limited because we really don't know anything about this new dyad and the Force concept. Now, Revan did have something like this. I believe it was with Bastila. I think you guys got to correct me on that one. I think it was with Bastila, but it wasn't nearly as powerful as it was with Rey and Ben. The whole teleportation of objects thing really confuses me still. I understand it's a very unique concept. It's a very unique thing that happens, like one in a Googleplex, one in a trillion, whatever. But to be able to transport objects and this and that, we saw, with the beads, and all that stuff on Kijimi or Pasana, and it just, for me, it's like, well, what's stopping them from being able to like just hug each other and then transport each other like throughout the galaxy, like, pull each other through this, whatever it could be. Maybe they create, I suppose they create a teleportation hole kind of thing. Is that what they're really doing? Is that what this is, a dyad? And is that how it should be explained? I almost feel like that's maybe where they're going with this. Because that would make sense. When she drops the lightsaber, it's like maybe a little like hole, like a teleport hole opened up, and drops it in, and he knows. And explains in the book that when Ben was fighting the Knights of Ren and she was fighting the guards, the Sith troopers, he all of a sudden got a vision of a blue lightsaber. And then he grabs it, and he knew instinctively that this was Luke's lightsaber. And it says it in the book. This was Luke's lightsaber, and he instinctively knew that this is now his, and it belongs to him. So that's kind of cool that they did that. As for the teleportation stuff, yeah, I'm still, like, why couldn't she... I don't know, why couldn't she just, like, hug the Emperor and be like, oh, grandfather, and then, like, Ben shows up and just like stabs him from behind, and he could be like off on Bespin, like across the galaxy or wherever, that's something that's a little confusing to me. Maybe she's in trouble. Why couldn't he just like pull her, and he could be on Coruscant and just pull her to safety or something, or like on his ship? That's another thing. Maybe they don't have control over it. Maybe it's just stuff like that that happens. As for Vader's helmet that fell on the ground on Kijimi, is it still there? Like, where is it now? I'm still confused about the teleportation stuff in the Force dyad. But now we know that this is what Plagueis wanted to do with Palpatine, and he failed, and Palpatine wanted to do with Anakin, but he failed. Now, the thing with Anakin's full power is this was not realized, right? Because he lost to Obi-Wan, the dark side got a hold of him, and it wasn't necessarily the dark side that made him weaker, but we see this constant theme with Darksiders in Star Wars, and it's basically that they have too much hubris. They're too arrogant. We saw it with Darth Maul, and he was just, he had killed Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi Master, and then he had defeated Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he was just toying with him, with the sparks and everything. So and he was just standing over him, towering over him as, like, I am the Sith Lord, I am your successor, and just, kind of being arrogant. But it was that which was his downfall. The same with Anakin. You underestimate my power. And it was that which was his downfall. He felt that he could, even though he had the disadvantage in the high ground, he knew, or he believed, that he could overcome this no problem. It also explains, and we're going like all around here, which is cool, it's fun. It explains in one of the comics that Anakin had studied Obi-Wan's fight with the Zabrak, with Darth Maul, tons of times, and he had even created a robot, the training droid in the temple, to look like Darth Maul and fight like Darth Maul. And Mace Windu and Obi-Wan and Palpatine, I've covered this in a comic, are watching over him as this is happening. And it's really sweet because Palpatine, this is like one of the first times that Palpatine becomes very intrigued with Anakin, and he's just like, huh. And Obi-Wan is like, yeah, he's been asking me constantly about the fight with the Zabrak on Naboo, and all these details and stuff. So when it came to Anakin jumping over Obi-Wan, he was like, well, you think, I know how you killed Darth Maul, I'm going to do the same thing to you. But of course, in this scenario, Obi-Wan was Darth Maul, and Anakin was Obi-Wan, but in a different time period. So that's kind of poetic if you think about it. I don't know if that's what George is really going for, but it's in the comics, right? So it kind of makes you think. This dyad in the Force, if Palpatine was successful, I don't know. I want to know more about this dyad stuff, because we don't know much right now. We just know that it's now the preferred thing before the rule of two, if I'm reading that right. So if that's the case, then, and he was successful, and he didn't lose to Obi-Wan, which made him lose a ton of his power and some of his force powers, which one of his main force powers was the ability to see into the future, right? These visions that he would always get. So it was really his destiny, if you think about it, unless Palpatine was putting those visions in his head, which is what we played upon for Vader Episode 1 for the fan film, is that he was putting these visions of him fighting Palpatine and then Padme and all that. He was putting those visions in his head as Vader was strung up in his chamber, getting inspected by the droid. If Anakin didn't lose to Obi-Wan, he would still have all of those visions and all of those abilities, and his powers would be, 1,000-fold. George Lucas then went on to say in an interview, I think with Rolling Stone magazine or something, he said that if Anakin didn't lose, he'd be more powerful, but the fact that he did lose, he was only 80% of the Emperor's maximum power and therefore could never overthrow him. That's why he was always looking for someone to help him. So keep that in mind, right? Vader couldn't do it himself at that point. So, and in the end, he needed Luke. And the only reason that he beat the Emperor, he killed the Emperor, was because the Emperor was so drawn in the dark side that he had blacked out and didn't understand what Vader was doing. He was just so angry at his betrayal, and he didn't notice, he didn't feel his betrayal because he was so focused on just killing Luke. And that's the thing with the dark side. You just keep going further and further into it until you just black out. And this is what was happening to Sidious as Vader picked him up and threw him down the shaft. So it all kind of comes full circle, and it makes you think. Right, and that's what I love about Star Wars. It meshes, dude. Like what they're doing right now is taking the old and putting it in there, and this dyad and the Force thing it's still confusing as heck to me. I still want to know how they teleport objects, but it's an interesting concept, and it's something that has been touched before in Legends, but not to this extent that we've ever seen before. If Plagueis had done this with Palpatine, I don't think Palpatine would have killed Plagueis, because they would have been this unstoppable team. And the dyad and the Forces, it says, the rule of two, a master always in desperate search of yet a more powerful apprentice, was a pale imitation, an unworthy but necessary successor to the older pure doctrine of the dyad. The older and purer doctrine, so the dyad in the Force was the older and more pristine, more real, more preferred doctrine, I guess, compared to the rule of two. So now we know what he wanted to do with Anakin. I hope you guys enjoyed this very all over the place conversation, but that's what I really love about these kind of videos, where I don't just overlay images and talk about lore or top 10 facts, because those are entertaining and fun. But I really like these podcast style of videos where I just sit here and I break stuff down and talk with you, and anything that I don't know, I love to ask you guys, because there are a lot of you that some things I don't know. There's tons of things I don't know, right? I'm just like you guys. I'm just a fan. So for me, I kind of learn this stuff as I go and apply it with the knowledge that I have from, growing up and reading books and comics and just being a fan. So I want to know more about this. I want to know more about this dyad, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. May the Force be with you. See ya.